Alright, so how's it going? Happy Monday, January 13th. This is Urbit Phoenix Meetup number 1. So thanks for coming, everybody. Huge crowd today. And my name is Matt. This is my co-host Nick. So we signed up for one of the bounties on the grants Urbit website. Just a little bit of a preface before I get going here. First of all, I think since our group is like intimate enough, we should just, if you have a question, you have a point or a comment of some sort, just call it out. Just call it out or raise your hand, whatever you feel comfortable. Ultimately, we're trying to have a conversation here. So, today it's going to be a high-level overview, probably a narrative which most of you have heard at least a few times and probably pretty familiar with, but I guess the kind of interesting thing about Urbit is that every time you try to explain Urbit, you realize how much of an exercise it is. Urbit is probably the strangest technology, but also the most ambitious and the most exciting technology that I've encountered. So every time you try to tell somebody about it who you think would be interested in hearing about it, there's kind of an exercise about how you explain it, what you think that person's going to actually engage with. So this narrative, I feel it's the way, this story is kind of the way I understand it. I just plunked out some slides, last night, and it's kind of how I think of it. I'm not a super technical guy. I've written a little bit of Hoon and made a few pull requests that were merged into docs and Arvo before they put it all into a mono repo on GitHub. But a lot of people have gone before me here and introduced Urbit in much better ways than I'm going to today. So this talk, I'm trying to share the slides with everybody. Somehow, maybe I'll post a comment on the Meetup group or on the Twitter. And so the slide deck is like littered with a bunch of hidden links in it. So hopefully you get the chance to sit down and click through them sometime after the talk and explore those links. There's some archives in there, and some interesting resources to jump into an area that you're more interested in getting a deeper feel for. So I don't think there's much else to say to begin. Title of presentation is not as okay. Alright, so I structured this talk to be consisting of 4 sections. First off, most intuitive question is always what in the world is Urbit? So we're gonna try to blast through that, at least on an introductory in a high level way. And then before we get too deep into it, which we're not gonna get that deep today, especially not too technical today. Hopefully next time or the time after we can delve into Knock or delve into Hoon or one of the veins or Argo, something. But we got to figure out why do we need Urbit. Third, we want to say, okay, well, now that we realize that there's a problem and we've defined it better than we had before the talk began, we want to ask, okay, so how does Urbit fix it? And then lastly, where do we go from here? What are the recommendations? I've got a few recommendations, and then there's a bit of a roadmap at the end. All right, so what in the world is Urbit? It's a question that I think really is gaining in popularity. Lots more people are hearing about Urbit, especially in the crypto sphere, which is where I know a couple of you guys came from to hear about the project. And I think a lot more traction is compounding as the years progress, and as Tlon in particular contribute and iterate on the original design. So I realized, looking at this picture, if you know much about Urbit, you could probably talk a lot about what Urbit is off of this picture. Raise your hand if you have a general sense of what this picture includes at all. A little bit? Okay. Well, I'm not gonna bore you with this abstract art here. I mean, it's beautiful, I think. At some point you will understand more what's going on here, but I thought that would be a good litmus test, kind of a good Rorschach for today. So it looks like I got 1.5 hands, maybe? Okay. All right, if we have time at the end, I can go back and explain a little bit about this. But so Urbit is a virtual city. It's not Urbit, you know, which I think there is another project out there. It's called urbit.us. Urbit is a kind of a compound word taken from the Latin root for city, urb, as in urban or suburb, urbane, and bit as in 0 or 1, you know, a switch in a computer. And it's a decentralized personal server platform. So the idea of a personal server alone is a novel concept. I mean, we've all heard of personal computers, but personal server is a new product category that I think Tlon, the corporation behind most of Urbit's contributions, was trying to run and trying to test and see how well people respond to the idea of a personal server. I don't think they're using the language as much nowadays, but technically it's a pretty sound explanation of what the Urbit codebase is, the Urbit project is. It's a clean slate OS, which actually used to be called an operating function, but that language is certainly not used very much anymore because, I don't know, it's too new. Maybe they'll get back to it, but it is an operating system in the sense that it performs all of the functions that you'd expect from a working computer with a working operating system on it. It's a peer-to-peer network, so you know a little bit about that from maybe some of your crypto studies. Obviously getting more and more popular, peer-to-peer networks are, and the first one that I had any familiarity with growing up with computers was torrents. It's an open source software project, of course. Since 2013, it's been published and tracked controlled on GitHub. It was in development for like 10 years by the founder before it was released to the public. And the most interesting, the most fascinating and compelling thing is that it's built to replace the internet as we know it. That's heavy stuff. I mean, that's not really a lightweight ambition right there. So before we go on, is there any comments or anyone about, does that kind of gel with what you've heard about Urbit from a high level? Are there any questions?
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about how they're not using the same terminology, more like personal server and operating function. Is that indicative of a change in strategy, or is it just merely a rebranding or a change in marketing tactics?
I think mostly the latter. Yeah, mostly the latter. I mean, when we talk about an operating system, people have, you know, they already have a definition. You know, like the operating system term registers some real semantics in people's brains. So I think that they probably wanted to leverage that, you know, when speaking about it, because Urbit is very new technology. I mean, I don't believe I've seen any project that's attempted to do what it is trying to do before. So when you're talking about new concepts, a new technology is as ambitious or as novel as this one? Huh?
Foolhardy.
Foolhardy?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. You know, it helps to give people a little room to pull themselves up so that they can bootstrap to seeing the new picture, you know? Good question. We can talk more about that later. It's not too important. It mainly is, I think, marketing for getting people hooked, you know? All right, so why do we even need Urbit? I mean, what's the point? Who cares? Are we living in an age of, like, you know, are we living in the golden age of technology and software where, you know, we're going to be able to upload our brain, which is supposed to be on setting right now, and everything's going to be automated away, and technology is, you know, the best it's ever been before. But I mean, to people who aren't satisfied kind of with the common service offerings from any of the big mega corporations like Google or Facebook or Microsoft or Snapchat or whatever, or Microsoft, Amazon, I mean, it's kind of like this notion and fatigue that comes about with using a lot of the modern services that we have in front of us today. I think. Is that how you feel? I mean, otherwise you might not be here, right? The internet becomes a bit fatiguing, right? I mean, no? You love the internet? You love everything about it?
Complexity, really, I think.
There's just no other option. You gotta use it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we all have computers in our pockets now. We all probably share pictures and text messages and emails every day, all day. You know, our lives certainly are more digital than they have been before, and there is a lot of power that we have, and communication power in using these services. But if you ever kind of try to venture outside the box, outside of the sort of walled gardens that a company like Apple builds for their consumers, you start to realize that, kind of like if you ever try to drive west on Baseline Road past Levine, it just kind of becomes nothing. It's just desert out there. And I think it's really the same thing with the whole the monopolies, the service monopolies on the internet today. It's very difficult to do much outside of the walled gardens. So I list here kind of three big problems to describe why the internet is broken. And notice the internet here, I talk about this internet, the one that's broken with a capital I. It's kind of the formal internet. It's the internet that we all know, that we all use. It's really the heavily iterated upon ARPANET from the 1970s, TCP, IP, HTTP. You know, the common web stack that runs 90+% of the services and websites that we use. So I'm just going to break it down a little bit one by one. Feel free to raise a point or raise a question as I go through these, but I try to explain a few problems and then their technical sources. So the sources of this, the root causes of those problems. And I do have to mention that the way that this problem of a broken internet is framed is kind of a novel creation of at least the founder of Urbit, if not, you know, some of the earliest contributors and employees of Tlon. I don't don't really think people, at least not that I was familiar with, I don't think people thought too much of the technical root causes for lots of these problems before, or at least not formally in writing. But anyways, first problem, this is something that you and I know intimately. If you ever try to move some data or do something with your quote unquote your data that isn't allowed by the walled garden, it's the fact that you don't actually own your data. We don't own the infrastructure or the applications that are on top of our data. We don't own the machine that our data resides on. We're really, despite this sort of personal computing revolution, we're still just using big mainframe computers, except for they don't call them mainframes anymore. They call them a data center. They call them big data. So really, with our devices, what we're doing most of the time is dialing in as clients into someone else's mainframe, whether it's Zuckerberg's or Satya Nadella's or Bill Gates's or oh no, that would be fun. You know. The second problem is that you can't avoid spam. This one in particular is a pretty novel way to address this problem. I guess the founder of Urbit, he said, well, why is there spam on the internet? Why can't we get around it? I mean, have you checked your Gmail spam folder ever? You should go, and you'll see it's a mess. I mean, Google does a pretty good job about keeping the spam in the spam folder, usually. Sometimes you might get one creeping in your inbox. I do. But I guess he thought about it like this. What does a spammer need to do business? What does someone need to stand up an operation and to send out phishing emails to try and hook you and get your personally identifiable information, your bank account number, your credit card number, your social security number? He took an economic look at it. He said, what does a spammer need in terms of resources? Well, first and foremost, kind of lowest level fundamental building block for the operation is you gotta have an address. You gotta have an address on the internet, whether that's an email address or an IP address. You gotta have an address. And the thing about the technical infrastructure of the internet as we know it today is that the IP address space is virtually unlimited. We have, I think IPv4 was 2 to the 32 addresses, but now with IPv6 expansion, I think it's 2 to the 128, which is huge. So when addresses are abundant, the basic laws of supply and demand dictate that supply vastly outweighs demand, and therefore the price of addresses are just going to take a nosedive into what is really the equivalent of nothing. It doesn't take any money, hardly, to spin up a new email, to spin up a new IP address on the internet. And for that reason, people, they can run their operations, and even though Google and Microsoft's highly advanced, high dollar value machine learning algorithms to detect and block spam, they will get blocked, but it doesn't matter. It's like it's just a revolving door. They just enter the market with a new address again, and it's over and over. Third problem is that you can't really use the internet very easily or very conveniently, and I think the best example for this is password management. There's just thousands of hundreds, at least tens of services that we all use. And if you were really good about it, you probably signed up for a Gmail account, and then you exclusively use Google's OAuth 2 service to authenticate with every single other service that you ever signed up for ever. But the more likely scenarios that you didn't. You have a Google, some of your accounts you log into with Google. Some of those accounts you might even have an email address, or if you try to put in an email address with a password, you could have sworn you had one, but then you realize, oh yeah, I signed up for this with Google, which is the same email. So, you know, there's like all this juggling, and there's also like a unrecognized, I think largely unrecognized mental burden that goes along with having to context switch between different services on the internet. You know, it's like, where did I put that? Was it in this silo or that silo? I don't really remember. So those are the three, I think, most important fundamental problems and technical reasons for them that motivate the need for Urbit. So considering these three, which I kind of like to call the internet trifecta, kind of the trifecta of problems on the internet today, all of these three contribute to this ubiquitous business model today, where companies aren't actually, I mean, they do build products and services, but by and large, the business model for corporations, especially in Silicon Valley, is not traditional. It's more based on surveillance. So lots of people now have this phrase that they call the surveillance internet. Today's internet is the surveillance internet. And the idea is just that business models need to focus on being able to sell eyeballs to customers in order to fund the development of whatever application, which usually is actually just a rebranding of like some sort of chat or messaging or communication service. You know, like how many apps are there out there that do video chat or do, you know, basically like text messaging with a different skin on it? You know? It's like, all right, we got the new messaging app going. It's got a new color. This thing's gonna fly. You know, and this is like the conversation, you know, founders are having with venture capitalists. And
Google has about 6 of those messengers.
yeah, right. Google's got 6 of the messengers out of the thousands or whatever, but probably the most popular ones too. Huh? So there's like a deeply rooted culture of fakeness in tech business applications, the app market, because really, I mean, it's kind of cliche maybe to us, but the whole notion that we are the products is true. You know, I mean, you can't. We shouldn't really forget about that. I mean, I don't know. Does this sound a little cliche? I mean, I feel like there are Generation Z teens out there that are like, oh no, we are the product. We're being sold. You know. Do you get that sense anymore?
No.
No? Okay. Well, maybe I spent too much time on the internet studying Urbit, but it's true. Does that make sense about the business model and how those problems kind of, from a technical place, they lend themselves to ultimately fruit in a business model that doesn't really serve users? Does that make sense?
Well, it serves them kind of as a side effect.
Yes, yes. I mean, the services, they are real. It's just that you have to make a lot of trades, right?
Well, I mean,
you pay for them in ways that you're not aware of unless you're a thinker.
yeah, I mean, if you're, in a certain sense, like the cows in the pasture, you know, they're getting fed, it's real food.
Yes.
I mean, they're not really the customer.
Right. Yes, yes. That's a good. I love beef. In this sense, I don't really want to be a cow.
Have you lost
So I call the internet kind of, it's a walled garden, and there are a few, but they're really full of weeds. You try to do much of anything useful, and there's just a bunch of weeds kind of strangling your plants, and they're overgrowing everything. Anything before we move on? I mean, are you convinced that the internet is broken yet? We can go back.
Broken sounds kind of binary.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not living up to its potential.
Yeah.
I think you'd probably get more agreement with that.
Yeah. So I think probably it's helpful to talk more about, and let me make sure I don't. Yeah, I don't think I do. Talk more about it. It's probably interesting to talk a little bit about the history of the internet. Have any of you looked into where it came from, or its beginnings, and how the protocols and the things developed over the decades? I mean, I'm not an expert, but I know a little bit that I think would be interesting to talk about. Yes? No?
Somewhat.
ARPANET? The ARPANET? You ever heard of it?
Yeah, CERN.
CERN, yeah. So I hope I don't butcher the story, but a bunch of really smart computer scientists, I think in the 70s, at a few research labs across the country, but mainly in Berkeley, I believe. Let's see, MIT, I think, was there too. They created a packet switching network where you could perform, I think, really basic communication over long distances pretty fast. They developed it for the military to use, and the infrastructure that we have today is not very different from what they were using back then. And so the clincher is that the people who developed ARPANET never imagined that personal computers would be everywhere, and sort of, I guess you could say, democratized. Democratized in the sense that everyone and your grandma has one and can get online with ease and relatively low cost. And for this reason, the means or the technology to support what I might call digital sovereignty, where you do own your data and you kind of control the destiny of your digital life through, determining what comes in and comes out of your computer in a real way that actually works. Those tools were never developed in a really integral fashion. And so the early internet, if you take a look at like a heat map of the network traffic that occurred when computers were still like a multi-$1,000 household device that only a certain demographic had access to, there was quite a bit more decentralization in that network traffic graph. But when you look at the graph today, you see an extreme orientation towards centralization. You see that most traffic is going through not even, I don't think even 50, it's more like around 10 really big companies, data centers. And so the whole dream of personal computing, I guess I would say the late 70s and the early 80s, where everyone would have their kind of home computer and that would be the hub of your digital life, was lost. It existed kind of with BBSs for a little while, but it was, you had to be a technical guy. And it's still, you have to be a technical person if you want to do anything real for yourself on the internet. Like, you have to be a system administrator or a software engineer to pick up and spin up a cloud computer on AWS, you know, host a personal
One click of the rope?
Yeah, please. Oh, sorry, what?
That was a joke. One click of the rope.
One click of the Roku? Yeah. It's not that easy to, you know, it's, so anyways, hopefully, does that clear it up a little bit?
I wouldn't say the internet is broken. I mean, where the internet replicates the real world, I can spend your house address even know what it is.
Mhm.
You can't stop it.
Right, but it costs you something, right, if you want to spam somebody.
Yeah, it's just a different scale of cost.
Well, in a sane world, I would, yes, right. In a sane world, I would want to be able to blacklist whoever you are, and
Right, but that's
and wait
with
until you do it again.
That's with some central provider. In this case, it's one of the 10 or 20 distributors of packages. The same with the internet. You have 10 or 20 ISPs.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say the internet itself, the network layer, is not broken. The software piece.
Yeah, so maybe the thing we should really be doing is making a distinction between the internet and the web in its current form.
Because the internet's fine. However, it runs on the internet.
You're a precise bunch, very
But
precise
the
bunch.
software layer on top is what's evolving in a very strange way.
Yeah, and I think really what it's like is it's a deep wound with 1,000 bandages on top. That's how I see it.
Like any large software project.
Yeah. It didn't have, since the development of the internet technology over the decades has happened so rapidly, it's like nobody really had the time to go back and see, okay, well, we kind of know what people want to use the internet now for, that we didn't actually dream of before. Why don't we try to build the technology to meet those needs in a way that the foundation is strong, is clear, is sane, and I think that's ultimately what that's what Urbit is. But we haven't gotten there yet. Makes sense. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a dramatic thing, right? I mean, it's got the punching value, you know, to say the internet is broken. Makes people be, at least it wakes people up. It woke you up, I think. Anyways, all right. So before we run out of time, looks we have. I mean, we got at least half an hour left. So, and the truth of the matter is that all these questions, like the discussion is so ongoing all the time. I mean, this is really just a conversation starter here. So it's true, you know, like I feel like research papers, PhD theses can be written about the phenomenon. Hopefully you have.
Right, but you can write all the papers you want as long as someone doesn't implement it, nothing happens.
Yeah. So I like it. I mean, I like this guy, Steve, because he's skeptical, and it's true. Like, practically speaking. So you're jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead, man. We'll get there.
I've had long conversations with Phil about this.
I'm sure you have. It's great. It's great to have you. So how does Urbit fix the problem? Okay. So take I mean, give me a break here for a sec. Let's just all come to accept that the internet's broken.
The web.
The web is broken.
Web
Okay.
2.0.
Okay. There you go. There you go.
With 100 meg JavaScript.
At least the sort of the environment that we talked about now, the internet as most people experience it every day is more or less broken. And if you really want to say, well, no, it's just like deeply hurt, then
It's wounded, it's limping, bleeding off the field.
I'm willing to cede this point and give that to you because I don't think it really matters too much. But let's open up the rabbit hole. You know, let's talk about Urbit. This has been for me the biggest rabbit hole in technology that I've ever encountered. I mean, there's no way I understand even close to the entire system. I try to learn more every day. It is simple in comparison to Linux. I think it's something, what is it? 50,000 lines of code, I think, Urbit, in its entirety.
All the files, the new file systems that we're talking about.
So, but it's orders of magnitude smaller than the Linux code base, right? Linux and C, that's what they taught me in school. And you kind of came out of school feeling like, oh yeah, I understand Linux. Now it's like I'm looking at Urbit and it's only 50,000 lines and I don't have any idea what's going on. But the idea is that, look, the internet is really beyond fixing. You can't slap another Band-Aid on. You gotta build something new. You gotta build something fresh that can perhaps live on top. That's gonna replace it maybe. Has anyone seen the Urbit primer that was published on urbit.org/primer before the current Urbit introduction?
How long ago was that?
Maybe not even a year, maybe 6 months. All right, well, it's linked here at some point in here. But the idea is that we want to avoid the false dichotomy of sysadmin versus megacorp. So, like I said, if you want to have digital sovereignty, if you want to own your data, if you want to control your computation on the internet today, the way it currently works is you have to be at least a sysadmin, or you just have to trade, make those trade-offs, and use megacorp services, right? So Urbit wants to attack that directly and say, no, this isn't how it should be. There should be better software that makes it easy for somebody to actually have a personal server, actually have a personal computer, where their entire digital lives can live unheeded without technical difficulty forever, actually. And the only way to do that, because the technology doesn't exist, is that you've got to build something better. And one thing, actually 3 things that I've been impressed with in the Urbit culture, or just the attitude of people who work on Urbit, is that they sort of have these guiding principles that are realistic and admirable from my point of view. And they all stem out of this first one, which is, you know, I'll say it again and again, with such an ambitious goal, if you're not exhibiting humility, then you really can't go anywhere. So, speaking to what Steve has been hinting at over there, the truth of the matter is that Urbit will probably fail. I mean, it's doomed, essentially. Who uses Urbit? Nobody. I mean, look how many people showed up today. I mean, the Urbit main Twitter retweeted our invitation. We've got our link on meetup.com. We've got links on urbit.org. I invited everybody I know who might have any semblance of an interest. You know, nobody cares about Urbit, and nobody probably will ever care about Urbit. That's the truth. I mean, statistically speaking, probabilistically speaking, which I'm not a determinist, like, I don't myself this. That's why I'm up here. But Urbit will probably fail. I mean, nobody really cares about data rights, data privacy, or data ownership. right? I mean, you might care, but probably not enough to spin up your own server on AWS and host an email server.
Yeah.
You have an email server?
I also have
This is the guy we need.
the little personal computer in my closet. So.
Yeah, I've got the same thing, Raspberry Pi, I've got
Okay.
a Rails app running on
I
there.
don't think I'm not have a board.
Nice.
Same idea.
Yeah.
Although, getting any rest of my family to use something similar is basically impossible, so.
Basically impossible, yeah. So, I don't think you can argue with me there. Urbit will probably fail. And it's that humility that I think is admirable, and it's a good motivating force that I've seen in the kind of Urbit space with contributors and people who work at Tlon. Because, taking that perspective, there's really only one option. We gotta make it so usable that it's virtually imperative. It's gotta be so good, it's gotta be so sleek, it's gotta be so easy. And it's even gotta be so low cost that it's almost like Facebook kind of was impossible to not get on. It's gotta be that good. And the only way it can get that good is with excellent engineering. So, if it's failing, you have to make it so useful as to be imperative. If it's not, then your engineering's probably not great yet, and you gotta go back. And I think this attitude is pretty pervasive in the space, which I think is good. It is good. It'd be nice to be one of those excellent engineers, but I'm sadly not. I don't have time, or I haven't made the time yet. I'm hoping that I would like to spend more. I mean, I finished in 101. It was fun. You heard of it?
How new is that?
It's pretty new.
Pretty new.
Yeah, that's right.
So, the thesis of Urbit is that the future was just a technical problem. The dream of decentralized computing, personal computing, it doesn't exist because nobody solved it technically yet. So, with that, what might the new internet look like? What would a world without megacorp services dominating the network traffic, the user interaction look like? This is kind of one of the most, this is kind of the weirdest thing about Urbit, is that an easy way to kind of launch into talking about what Urbit, what kind of world or digital world Urbit might enable is by looking at this app that's really popular in China called WeChat. Have you heard of it? Yes?
Yeah, everyone uses it over there.
Yeah, so there's a good, I think I'd heard about it from Galen, or it's one of the talks before, but there's a really good quick video that I want to show from New York Times. If I can get sound.
What OS are you running? Check your output. Check your send outputs. I just really do, yeah.
Over notifications.
See the real team. Yeah, so your laptop's not detecting it.
Right.
There's another wire.
Well, can you change your output device?
There's only one.
Oh, that's not.
But the VGA has this other cord. Oh wait, here it is.
There we are.
There we go.
Oh, sound like VGA.
Right.
Alright, cool. Beautiful.
If you are sitting in the United States or Europe right now, you've probably never used a Chinese app. But the reality is, if you want to know how the internet will develop, China, the land once known for its cheap rip-offs, has actually become a guide to the future. You know, the internet is the internet, but for China, the internet is more like an intranet. It's largely walled off from the Western world by this incredibly complex system of filters and blocks that we call the Great Firewall. And basically, the Great Firewall blocks any foreign site the Communist Party doesn't really control. So that means there is no Facebook, no Twitter, no Google. Instead, what filled the internet vacuum was a generation of Chinese copycats that have grown into huge companies. So for Google, you had Baidu. For YouTube, you had Youku. For Twitter, you had Sina Weibo. The list goes on and on. It's almost as if the Chinese internet is a lagoon as an aside to the greater ocean of the internet. And in that lagoon, there are these swamp monster apps that bear some resemblance to the creatures in the ocean, but are mutated in some ways because they evolved in a different kind of environment. But things have started to shift in the sense that before, no one outside of the lagoon really cared about the swamp monsters. But now, all of a sudden, some of the features they've developed are so amazing that Western apps are trying to copy them. And the greatest example of this is WeChat. WeChat is an example of, for lack of a better word, a super app. It's a Swiss Army knife that basically does everything for you. It's your WhatsApp, Facebook, Skype, and Uber. It's your Amazon, Instagram, Venmo, and Tinder. But it's other things we don't even have apps for. There are hospitals that have built out whole appointment booking systems. There are investment services. There are even heat maps that show how crowded a place is, be it your favorite shopping mall or a popular tourist site. The list of services goes on basically forever. But it's not the variety of things you can do on WeChat that makes it so powerful. It's the fact that they're all in one app. So why does that matter? Hypothetically, imagine you're sitting at home and one day you notice your corgi is dirty. You open WeChat, hit a few buttons, and a few hours later a man shows up at your door with some shampoo and a big vacuum. Your dog gets cleaned and he looks great. You take a photo, you share it with your friends, and tag the dog cleaning business. You haven't left the app. Your friend who likes Hello Kitty and works a boring office job is slacking off at work and looking at WeChat. She sees the photo of your clean corgi. She decides she wants her poodle clean. She clicks the tag on your photo and orders the same service. Within seconds, the man with the big vacuum is on his way to her house. She pays him, and he's happy because he got paid instantly on WeChat. She starts chatting with you to thank you. Neither of you have left the app. While chatting, she tells you about a new hip noodle joint. She says, you have to come. It's a schlep, but you accept. She orders food while still at her desk. You order a taxi. She pays for the food. On the way to her house, the man with the big vacuum invests the money he earned from both of you into a wealth management product that's probably a little too risky. Neither of you nor the man with the big vacuum have left the app. Both of you arrive and the app tells the kitchen you're there. Your WeChat profile photo pops up on the wall. It's an old photo from the year you had that weird part in your hair. Of course she makes a comment. Your food is served. You notice your meat is a bit overcooked, so you snap a photo and post a disparaging restaurant review. You're already on your phone, and you remember you still owe your friend money because she paid. You transfer her money. Neither of you, the man with the big vacuum, nor the restaurant, have left the app. At the restaurant, there are no menus, there are no waiters, there is no cashier. There is only WeChat. By rolling so many functions into one single app, it's altered the concept of virality. It's no longer just videos or images or tweets that can go viral. It's a dog washer, noodles, all sorts of companies and products that get the push of the social network. Here in China, that network is 700 million people. Sounds great, right? Well, it is, but using a single app to find a date, schedule an oil change, or notarize a document also enables WeChat to collect a staggering volume of personal data. They know what you talk about, who you talk about it with, what you read, where you go, why you're going there, who's there, how you spend money when you're online, how you spend money when you're offline. The list goes on indefinitely. For advertisers, this is a miracle. It's the combined data of Facebook, Amazon, Google, and PayPal, all in one place. The problem is, all of the data is information Chinese companies are forced to share with the Chinese government, which has a long record of human rights violations and isn't exactly shy about stalking its citizens. So if you're not in China, why does this matter? It matters because we're starting to see a number of Western tech companies attempt to replicate super apps like WeChat. For the companies, it's incredibly powerful. And for you and me, it's convenient and even transformative technology. But of course, it could also be problematic. Concentrating so much data in so few hands could lay the groundwork for an Orwellian world where companies and governments can track every single movement you make.
Pretty interesting, right? Kind of one app to rule them all. Kind of another interesting thing about WeChat is that really only the data models are the things that dictate how you transact. So you can swap like user interfaces like you with marketplaces on WeChat for looking at a restaurant menu or looking at your whatever social feed or conducting your business at a bank. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's interesting that China had the first one of these types of seamless, fully integrated super apps to develop in their culture.
Well, they don't have an option. They have to use it.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to kind of look at the history of WeChat and how it came to be that one ended up dominating the space. But so we don't really have anything like that here. In all hopes it would be Urbit. It essentially would be, Urbit would be distributed WeChat on Martian technology. Makes sense, right? So, really, WeChat is like the final iteration of mainframe computing. If all of the Facebooks and the different megacorp services that we think of here in the West, if those are iterations of mainframe computing, WeChat's kind of like the final iteration. It's the iteration that ends the end of the list. But it's still operating within the same paradigm of client-server architecture, of client-server computing, mainframe computing. So Urbit, I guess you could say, is trying to build something like WeChat, except for rather than have it be a central service, it's something that you run and you control yourself. And it's technically conducive to doing that and making that easy. So now I'd like to start to talk about some of the features that Urbit provides and a bit about the technology behind them. This is where we're going to start to hit on the high level what Urbit OS and where Urbit ID are, what Urbit technically is. So it might be more helpful to look at this first, actually.
We have 10 minutes left.
Yeah, we got 10 minutes, so there's really only a few more slides. But I mean, what do you think? Are you exhausted? Because we don't have to delve in here yet. I mean, we could save it for another talk to start to dive deep into the technical architecture of Urbit. It's up to you. I mean, I'm extending. I mean, hopefully that some of you guys are interested in going and having a beer and a bite to eat down the street, I think that's what I'm gonna do.
I go to Jet after this. I'm actually really interested in kind of like the development so far and kind of like how close the stack is to being ready to have like development applications.
Yeah, okay. Alright, well I didn't put that in my slides, but there is a roadmap. What do you guys, what's the consensus here? Cause, you know, I'm not really.
Maybe we should look at the roadmap.
Just look at the roadmap?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. So, yeah, have you seen the roadmap post? That's basically the best material to talk about where Urbit is and where it's heading. Are you familiar with like who develops Urbit?
Yeah, I mean the company I haven't kept up in the last 6 months to a year.
I don't think much has changed, just over Talent has more employees now.
Right.
I think there are more contributors. Obviously, there are meetup groups now happening across the country,
Across the world.
across the world. Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest one's in China.
Really?
Like it's the whole Chinese government.
Nice.
Take Urbit and use it for what it should be used for.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess most of the development is still centralized in San Francisco at Tlon. There are plenty of contributors on the GitHub. You can see that stuff on the repository. Let me open up the roadmap and the primer though for you. So I have like a recommendations slide, and it's got a bunch of links to things that you might be interested in jumping into more. So here's the roadmap, and I can show you like kind of what Urbit looks like today. So this is Masterbot Tech, my planet. I run it on a Linux VM for $5 a month, and it serves Landscape, which is the web interface.
I love that convenient SaaS.
Yeah, yeah. You know, at this point, we don't have NOC machines yet, because the thing about Urbit is it's technically independent of Linux. You don't need Linux to run Urbit. You just need something to interpret NOC. Right now, you know, Linux is pervasive enough and cheap enough to get a VM to spin one up. But anyways, this is the web interface. So there's a web interface, there's a command line interface. This is one of the applications currently available. Really one of the two at this point. I haven't really tested out Dojo recently. If you look at the bottom, you can run code.
This is a REPL running on the VM that you have posted on.
It's running on the Urbit, which is running on the VM. Yep. It's pretty nice. It's called the Dojo. There's a blogging application called Publish, which I've been pretty happy with, but except for the fact that it's only useful for publishing to people that have Urbits, unfortunately. But I could, you know, like you can actually access these pages, these blog posts, as just a normal user on the web. Like I couldn't type in the URL without having my own Urbit. It's kind of a bummer, and I think that's a big miss. They used to have a mechanism where you just would drop a markdown file into a web folder on the file system that you mount to your Unix device, and it would automatically serve that markdown file, you know, at the path rendered as HTML. Fortunately, that's gone. And then what is probably the most used application besides the weather, I guess, is the chat, which is actually it's pretty good. It's getting better every day. And Dopsod/Urbit help. That's kind of like the main channel, I guess you could call it, where everybody posts about Urbit.
So this chat history is stored on your instance only, or this is everybody that's got their own has a copy?
It's a fully federated chat, so it's stored online. It's stored on everyone who's a member.
Everyone has their own copy.
Everyone has their own copy.
Really hilarious if Mastodon problems happen on Urbit.
If Mastodon what?
Problems happened on Urbit.
Mastodon problems? Like
kernel functions was federated across other nodes and the
Oh.
nodes were shut down.
Yeah. There are mechanisms and thoughts that are going into Urbit to prevent such things, because Urbit, while decentralized, especially relative to the current, megacorp internet, or surveillance internet, as I like to call it, is still not completely decentralized. So not all nodes are equal in the Urbit address space. There's a small kind of utilitarian hierarchy to it, which we're gonna have to address, in the next meetup.
Right, essentially, right, you'd have some sort of reputation if you were spamming the network or doing illegal things. The star that you're under can stop routing your packets for you.
Anyways, to get back to the roadmap though, so that's Urbit today. That's what they call OS 0, 2019. They want to build OS 1 and ship it actually Q1 2020. So we might be seeing more of an interface like this. That's supposed to be the first minimal but complete release of Urbit. And they use the analogy of a Nokia 3310 for personal cloud computing, which is kind of neat. I didn't have one of these, but I definitely played Snake on one of these when I was growing up. I wish I had this when I was a kid. And then Q2, I believe, 2020 is for OS 2, where it's an approachable, expanded, and easier to use OS 1. So you can get a group of people together to chat, publish blogs, share links, and supports Bitcoin and Ethereum transactions from Urbit to Urbit, which would be cool. So that's pretty much it. It's not going to be ready for everyday users for a while. I mean, you could estimate, you could guesstimate, you could speculate, but and it's said often that the design and the architecture of most of Urbit is complete, is sound, and it's really implementation problems that need to be hashed out.
So is the web as a dependency supposed to be a temporary thing, and then eventually it has its own protocols, or is this kind of like the idea is Urbit is going to target browsers, and then?
No, the long term is not any sort of dependency or any sort of protocol, existing protocol as a dependency. Right now it uses UDP instead of TCP/IP.
Right, but like the app you were demonstrating, that like is just something that's rendering like HTML, let's say.
Oh, right.
So
Yeah,
is
yes.
that kind of like the plan, and it's like the UI level is going to be similar to the like Web 2.0?
No, they are actually planning on rolling out a native application, I think for OS. Definitely in 2020. That's what Phil said.
Yeah, I've read so right now the UI is built with React, and I've read that they're trying to get away from that eventually and to just go natively. But I don't know how soon that will happen.
It's an interesting problem. I'm not anywhere close to a front end engineer, so I'm like,
I mean, you can't reinvent every wheel at the same time.
right, I mean, we're
Right.
still dealing with computers here. We're still dealing with like rectangular screens and pixels, you know, and everything. So, I don't think the idea is that we're ever gonna like pave over people's home. Well, I mean, actually it could be that someday you have like a computer that doesn't, at home, that doesn't actually need to run Windows or run Mac. Maybe, but for the foreseeable future, you know, Urbit is almost kind of like WeChat in the sense that if it does well, if it performs well the way it should, the way it's designed to, it'll be like your WeChat, but better, way better.
And these applications, are they written in that Hoon language, or
Yep.
are they written in a higher level language that compiles?
So all of the applications on Urbit are written in Hoon, and then their front end, the front end interfaces, at least for the web interface, is written in JavaScript or something. But the data model and the application itself and its underlying infrastructure is all written in Hoon. So
There have been talks of building a Lua compiler. May make it a little bit easier for people who don't want to learn Hoon.
Should have written the front-end closure script.
well, there are many opinions, but this does work for now.
It compiles the same thing.
It's good enough to, you know, hopefully I can see you guys in here. Urbit-PHX.
Is this linked from the Meetup group?
I have these recommendations in the slides, so I'm gonna have to share those. Figure out, does anyone know a good file sharing service? I'm like, where do I even upload a PDF?
It's 2020.
2020?
Still this problem.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. I don't even have an infrastructure where I can drop a file and be like, all right, here's a link. You know? Not big. I mean, I guess I have a Dropbox.
Google Drive, Dropbox,
All right. Sounds good.
Keybase.
Yeah, I'm on Keybase.
Keybase, you can drop a file. Keybase, okay.
But you have to create a chat room then from the file. Anybody there would have everything except the file.
Wonderful.
It's distributed, so it has all those problems.
You guys, if you're technical guys, you should read the white paper. It's very, very interesting, and it will satiate your technical appetite, most definitely. It's linked here. It's not sure what's going on with the link click through here, but looks like. Yep, trying to open up. Here it is. So the white paper was published in 2016. It's about 50 pages, but it's worth a chew.
This is pre-rebranding, so I don't have to go through like a translation pass.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's really only the highest level marketing and like introductory stuff that has had rebranding. Most of the underlying technical names for components and primitives, all that stuff is still the same. That's a whole nother discussion too, an interesting discussion. Oh yeah, and then hopefully you should really click this too. This is the old primer, which I've had a way better time using to help explain Urbit, like in just one quick fell swoop. it leads you along a pretty compelling narrative. It tells you what Urbit is. It's not very shy. It's got a nice video. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's worth a watch too. I'm not sure the network connections are any good right now. But yeah, I mean, hopefully you'll join me.